It's time to get sexy. So watch Secular Sexuality live Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTSS and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callsex.
Welcome, everybody. It is April 3rd, 2022. Every time I want to say 2021. We are Talk Heathen. We are a product of the atheist community of Austin, and we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of positive atheism and the separation of religion and government. You can call in at 512-991-9242, and we need your calls. We want to talk to you, specifically you. Yes, I'm talking to you with the phone in your hand. Dial. Today, I am here with student Dr. Ben, which we have an interesting conversation to go into. But first, yeah, how are you doing today? How are things going?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. You know, surviving the last bit of my third year of medical school, about to start applying for residencies this summer. So it's been busy, but it's great to be back. I love this show. Excited to be here.
Be honest with me. Are you burnt out with it?
A little bit, but it's fine. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here. This is my escape.
Exactly. Yes. No, I agree. You know, we appreciate the knowledge that you have coming into and that you can offer. Hopefully that doesn't, get back into the burnout of anything that you don't want to talk about in that case. But we do appreciate your knowledge going into it. I want to remind people that if you like what we do and you want to support the show, there are many ways that you can do that. Below the video, you can become a channel member by clicking the join button. That gives you access to emojis, also gives you access to things like not having to deal with the slow mode. And so you can type whenever you want, as long as you're, I'm going to say this, don't be annoying about it, but you get that removed. And then you can also, below the live chat, there is a donation button. If you donate there, all the proceeds go to the atheist community of Austin. YouTube does not take out anything there. And you can also support us on Patreon at tiny.cc/PatreonTH. And you can become a top 5 patron member and be shouted out on the show. Looks like we have a call, but I wanted to start on a topic real quick if you wanted to dive into that, because there seems to be some tension. I mean, not really tension. There's two aspects to this I kind of want to talk about real quick, which is one, there's seemingly some tension that some people have when the word philosophy is brought up. And then on the other side, there's some tension that some people have when the word science is brought up. More importantly, when we relate those things towards a method of determining truth, I'm interested in first off, your take on kind of where they both fit right in that domain. And then I guess your just general take on that, since this seems to be not a hot button, but people have various different opinions on it.
Yeah, so this is interesting and a little bit personal, because before I got into the more call-in show scene, I was thinking to myself, this isn't something that I could ever be good at, because I'm not a philosopher. I don't study philosophy. I don't know how to necessarily approach things from that perspective. But then I learned that that's not always necessary. There are multiple ways to approach a question and a truth claim, and science is a way to get there, and I am familiar with that. But there does seem to be this dichotomy that people are trying to make of science and philosophy, but they're not dichotomous. There's an overlap, and in fact, I think both fields need each other, and they're just two different directions to approach the same kinds of questions. And of course, I think that there are different applications for them. Philosophy tends to be more theoretical and more focused on the logic and the syllogism and that kind of demonstration, whereas science focuses a lot on numbers and causality, especially questions related to causal relationships are great for science. But something that philosophy does really well is focus on validity and soundness of claims. But at the same time, I don't think you can reach soundness with philosophy on its own. I think that you need some way to demonstrate that. And that's where science comes in, being able to determine what is the cause of this. Is there a relationship? And also, what is the likelihood that it is coincidental? And I think that's something that really you can only do with science. But on the flip side, some more abstract concepts that don't necessarily imply a causal relationship, such as questions of morality. Morality is not something that I don't think science is very good for. So I think you need both sides of this. And I think maybe instead of having the tension, we can, just have more discussions and approach it from both sides.
Yeah, and so there's a lot you said there that I agree with. Working kind of backwards, I'm kind of in a similar boat as you, where I don't know that like statements about values or what one ought to do, categorically speaking, or like objectively. I don't know that domain is going to be successful in a domain that's trying to determine facts about the world. And if we draw that kind of distinction between facts and values, then I think that's precisely kind of where philosophy, like something like meta-ethics or normative ethics or something like that, come into play. And so I agree, they work mutually in that sense, especially with science, where you have things like a philosophy of science. But another thing you had said was about like the soundness of like a premise. And so for anyone that might not know, you kind of look at that as like whether or not the premise is true. And so it seems like what you're kind of laying out is that with like, say, an inductive or some empirical verifiable method, we can repeatedly just check that the soundness of that premise, right? And you're saying that's what's going to be the utility of science kind of over philosophy in a way.
Yeah, and because theory can only get us so far with any claim. You can intuit and you can use logic to say this makes sense, but there are a lot of things in reality that just don't make sense and don't align with the theory, and that's why we need to demonstrate it. Because if you were to just assert that something is true because you logically got there, that doesn't necessarily mean that reality is going to play out that way, and that's why we need to be able to demonstrate it.
Sure.
So,
like if it's Tuesday, like you could take like a valid inference rule or something like what's called modus ponens, which would be like, if you accept that P implies Q, right? P therefore Q, and what you're saying is kind of like, if it's Tuesday, the moon is made of cream cheese. You're like, well, that's precisely where science is going to come in and be like, look, this implication clearly doesn't work, regardless of whether or not the structure of the argument was valid. The premise is going to rely on empirical and observational evidence for us to realize, like, yeah, if it's Tuesday, the moon being made of cream cheese clearly is like a non sequitur and doesn't actually apply to the phenomena or something like that, right?
Yeah. And then I think this can be flipped back around too, because once you have that data, you then still have the task of needing to, communicate that with other people. And that's when you have to bring it back to the realm of logic and effectively argue those points, because you could just throw out some numbers and be like, hey, look, data, but what does this mean? And how does this apply to other scenarios? And how are you going to get somebody else who didn't do the study? How are you going to convince them that was correct? And you have to make sure that when you're arguing that you're using proper logic in communicating the science.
Sure. Yeah. And there's one distinction that some people make in philosophy, which is like super, it's a little more esoteric in the sense, but there's something called like a priori knowledge and a posteriori knowledge, or like, I don't know if you're familiar with those terms, but one sense is gonna have this distinction of like, well, there's knowledge that's gained kind of, in the armchair through deduction and these types of things. Would you just hold to that? Like, I mean, would you hold that that type of reasoning's valid, or useful, but the way you actually provide some results is going to be through like the empirical or a posteriori type of analysis?
Well, I think so. because of the fact that I think you need to demonstrate confidence and you need to demonstrate significance, because like it bugs me a little bit when people say, yeah, I'm 90% confident in whatever position. Like, but how did you determine that percentage? There are definitions within science and stats that say this is what confidence is, and you can determine what is your confidence. And I think too, we're missing each other a little bit on definitions. I think philosophy has certain definitions and science has certain definitions, like confidence would be one that's very different. So if you said
or
you were
nothing
confident,
or something like that, the word nothing. No, I would agree. If you want, we're stacking up callers, so let's go ahead and
let's do it.
Get into. We're gonna go to Snowdon in Canada. No pronouns given. How is intelligent design coordinated? Why was I given joints? Why do my eyes lubricate? Why aren't we just rocks? So
let me,
did you want?
Can I answer the question? Can I start off first?
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you want to kind of elaborate on that, and then I'm going to have Ben take over.
Okay, so let me first start by saying that how I am somewhat of an agnostic, okay? I don't think it's so much about if there's a God or not. I think it's what do we call God? I think that's the question we need to be asking ourselves, because we are here, we're communicating, there's function going on here. So obviously we were created by something or developed by something. Even if that's evolution, I consider that could be God, if you want, because there's coordination going on here. So my question is this, okay? Intelligent design, okay? Why, if you look at just the hand alone, I won't even get into the eyeballs or anything like that. If you look at the hands alone, right? Why our fingers have joints on them? Why not just straight fingers? Why was I given a thumb and joints on my hand to hold onto a ball to grasp something? Why is even my hand at the end of my arms? Why not coming out of my ears? Why not coming out of my hips? Why was it put right on my arm where I can extend it and also have an elbow to bend my hand as well? Exactly. What coordinates these things? Look at the eyeball.
Let me counter a little bit. Because it's very easy to look at the human body and say that, wow, this is incredible that we're able to do these things with our body. But really taking this and breaking it apart into engineering components and to the anatomy itself, if you really analyze it, the human body is not that well organized. In fact, your example right now is the hand and the arm. Let's take the arm. The arm is a great example. The arm is a class 3 lever. It is one of the worst levers for being able to move objects. And you, granted, you get some mobility. That's what you gain from having a class 3 lever. But the amount of force that you'd have to put into your arm to lift, not even to lift, to just isometrically hold a weight in your hand, it's several times more. And I don't have the calculations in front of me, but I remember doing these calculations in a kinesiology class. The amount of force you have to put to just hold a weight in your hand, because if you think about your hand and your arm, the weight is in your hand. It's way far away from the fulcrum. And so the amount of force you're putting in is significantly higher with a class 3 lever than it would be if you were to have like a teeter-totter and you had the fulcrum in the middle and you could just put the weight on one side. So thinking about it being, in an engineering perspective, very, very impractical for the energy, does that play a factor in how you would think about the arm?
No, you've changed my question, actually. You failed to answer the question. And I'll tell you why, okay? All you've done is compared the arm to something that could be better than the arm. But you haven't explained why. Let's take the eyeball as another example, okay? The eyeball has all these rods and all these things going on that makes it function, okay? And it's round. It has this panoramic view as well, you know? What coordinated all of these things to work in a function that was functionable for us? it's like, again, why weren't we just rocks? Why were we given? Look at the arm. Let's go back to the arm if you want.
So there's a problem with how we're approaching this. There's a problem, and I think this is something that is commonly done. You seem to want to relate all this back to one thing. You're lumping a bunch of factors together, and instead of looking at it individually, because these are a bunch of pieces that happen to be associated, but do you think that maybe you are associating all of these factors with one cause when maybe there are multiple factors at play?
Well, that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure out what coordinated all these factors to give us these functions. Why aren't we just a rock? Again, how did we develop all of these functions that are coordinated to make us do these things? Why were we given eyes? Why are we giving 2 eyes? Why a neck to train?
I'm trying to, Snowdon, I'm kind of confused. Like because when you're saying like, why were we given eyes or something, like, I don't know that's the right.
Yeah, why aren't we a rock?
I don't even know how to digest the question. Like, there are rocks, right? And we're not those things. And we had the different environmental pressures that like a rock doesn't succumb to. I'm not really understanding what the. Yeah. So what are you like? Just help me out here. What is help me get to the end. What is it? I'm not really following.
How did I, right? Compared to a rock, right? Why do I have all of these functioning things to be able to sit on this computer and talk to you? Why isn't a rock have the same thing? Why am I given all of these functions that that makes me able to get up, go and do something and make something of myself, right? And why am I given I have all these tools, fingernails. I have saliva and a teeth to chew on food, to take it down, to digest in my system, right?
So can we reframe? I want to challenge you to
mute for a second.
I want to challenge you to reframe your question real quick, because we are inserting bias already. The fact that you are saying given, you're approaching it with the assumption that there was something to be given, or that there's something else there. Can you reframe the question for us in a way that does not imply that factor?
Yeah, and also if you're just going to say like, why do we have, real fast, if you're just going to say, why do we, real fast, Snowdon, if you're just going to ask like, why don't we have these things, and you called into like an atheist show for Talk Heathen rather than talking to like a biologist or just, you know, doing, I don't really understand like why that you would think you're going to get all the answers that are going to satisfy you here. It's like, you might as well just say like, why are we here? Why do we exist? Why do we have consciousness? Like everybody, we're all asking these questions, but like, I don't know why, what you think I'm going to give to you that's going to make you get off the phone and say, oh, okay, I get it now.
Okay. Can I go now? This is why I'm bringing the rock into the situation, okay? We could have just been a rock sitting in space and time, just sitting there doing nothing, okay? This is why I bring in the rock again. Why is it that we have all of these functioning parts of our bodies that allows us to do all of these things? Why are we able to see? What is the purpose of us being able to see where we're going? Okay. Again, compared to a rock, right?
So once again, here, I'm going to take this in a little bit of a different direction. But also, once again, we are inserting given, and we're inserting a why as if there's a purpose to this. Let's take that out, because we're putting some bias in. But I want to ask you some questions here. Just brainstorming, because I think we're making some leaps from one point to another without really thinking about where we're going. What are some differences, even on the small level? What are some differences between a rock and a person?
A rock doesn't have the ability to move around and do the things that we're doing. It's just
okay. So how come a rock can't do those things? What's different about a human that makes me able to do those things and a rock can't?
That's my question. Why do we have all of these functioning parts, right, that are coordinated, able to us to function?
Yeah, so let's think about that, because there's some things that we know about how this the structure would change the function. Structure and function are related, right? So what are some things that allow a human to move? Let's take movement as a great example. What factors in my body, what parts, what physiology allows me to do that?
Mm-hmm. Example like legs, moving, putting one foot in front of the other one allows me to move.
So what things with the legs allow me to move?
Toes, gives me balance.
We have muscles, right?
Yeah, we have muscles, toes to give us balance.
Okay.
Arch, we have heels and all these things. We have two legs so that you can put one in front of the other and be balanced as you move towards.
Mm-hmm. So what allows the leg, what allows the muscles of the leg to move?
The trigger from your brain telling it to move.
Okay. Yeah. So we have some neural inputs.
Move, like, what's that? Yes.
Yeah. So we also have some muscle fibers, right? We have some compounds that act. We have some tropomyosin. We have some ATP.
Yeah.
We have a bunch of factors here, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we've given a bunch of reasons, a bunch of factors of why a human is not a rock. Right.
Okay. So we understand that, right? We both get that, right? So my question to you is why? How come if there's no if we're not intelligently designed, right?
I think we're getting there, right? We're establishing that a human is not a rock. We've given some examples of why a human is not a rock, and we're already breaking this down to why a human can do these things. We've established that muscles can help a human to do this versus a rock. Yeah. We have some whys here, and we don't need to jump to a supernatural why. We have some very concrete, demonstrable whys. And I think, do we need to jump to a spiritual why or a supernatural why?
But how did it coordinate itself to give us all these different functions, like an eyeball, for example, eyelashes that whisk away water that's coming down off of our eyes to go.
We could break this down further. We'd be here all day, but just in the same method I just took you through, we could do that same method for every part of the body. And this would take me probably a year to just talk about how the body works together and the factors involved. But I think we can demonstrate why.
Yeah, and look at just like something like something like the eye, right? Where you have like light sensitive cells that distinguish like a distinction between dark and give certain advantages, right? And then once
it lets light in and stuff like that.
So right. Yeah, so right, and so when you have like the ability to real fast, okay, please, right? So when you have the ability to have like more cells to distinguish like different angles of light or things that are gonna benefit the organism or something like that, and then I don't know the term. I think it's like Ben might know it's like a globule or something that forms like a cup, right? The point of saying this is that we could take like, you asked this question, why do we have this? Because then I'm looking at the notes. Why do my eyes lubricate? Why was I given joints? Why aren't we just rocks? It's going to be impossible to take this call because like we could talk forever on just like looking at intermediate species that have these different stages of development of the eye and showing like, hey, like Inoculus, or I don't know if that's the right organism. I'm terrible with organisms, which we discussed before the show. But you're right. We can see like these different types of intermediate stages, and we could sit there forever and show you these things. But I just think you're just going to ask, well, why is this? Why is that? And it's just like the toddler asking why every time. So no offense, Snowdon, but we're going to have to move on. I got 8 calls on, and I got to move on to other callers. But if you want to call in next week and have a conversation, we could do that. We got to move on to other callers.
Can I just say one thing before I hang up?
Sure.
My thing isn't about why, right? My thing is on intelligent design. This is compared to a rock. We are clearly intelligently designed. Something coordinated all of these things to function.
Now we have something to talk about, all right? And like if you're I'm gonna put you on mute. If you're just gonna ask us why, but you say that you have an explanation for the phenomenon, it's best explained by intelligent design, then that burdens on you, right? Asking us questions on something that you don't think is the case because you've already solved why we have what we have, then provide the argument, right? Render the argument or give the evidence, but don't just waste our time for 13 minutes asking questions that you apparently have the solution to, right? That just seems nonsensical to me. So I'm gonna give you a chance. You can give us what you think is the evidence for intelligent design. Let you give your case. You have 30 seconds. I'll give you the Matt treatment, right? You get 30 seconds. If you veer off, I'm just gonna move on to another caller. You're off mute. Or you're not off mute. Now you're off mute. Apologies.
What? Oh, okay.
You're off.
I didn't call to. I'm on that. Okay. I didn't call to tell you that I have all the answers to what it is and why we have all these functions. My thing is to say that how clearly that there's some sort of intelligent design happening here, because we have all of these functioning parts that are coordinated to do these particular moves and give us these things to do instead of like a rock just sitting there doing nothing.
Okay.
So we've been intelligently designed to function in a particular way that a rock can't do it. So, and how are these things coordinated if there's nothing?
So
let's say an alien designed us, for example. Why not an alien be God that designed us, for example? Is what I'm trying.
Okay, so we're going off in a lot of directions. Let's keep the first example. So let me help real quick. So you are asserting that because these are coordinated, that we have intelligent design. How would we demonstrate that? What are some things that we could do to design a study that would tell us whether or not intelligent design caused this to happen?
Hello? You're here? Were you not? I put you on mute so you could listen to him. Did you hear did you hear what Ben said or no?
Yeah, I heard him. Yeah, I heard him.
Okay.
I heard him. Do you want me to say
Yeah, so we have the question. So how would we demonstrate this?
How do we demonstrate what did you say?
Intelligent design. If that's the cause, we should be able to put it to the test, and we should be able to demonstrate that that is the cause. So how could we set up a study so that we could demonstrate it? What variables do you think could be at play that we need to isolate to look at this?
Can I tell you what my answer is to that?
Yeah, that's what he's asked. That's what we're.
Yeah. I think what you're doing is you're making this more difficult than it needs to be. We could just use our common sense.
No, you can't.
No, you can't. Hey, look, you want me to show you why you can't? My common sense is antithetical to yours. It says that there's no design, right? Okay, now what? Do you think that has force? Do you think that has any force on you? Me just saying I detected intuitionally that I have this common sense? No, that's not the case, right? Do you think that your common sense leads you to the true conclusions most of the times?
No, the common sense allows you to be able to distinguish things and discern things. For example, bones as a structure, and then skin covering up all of these different things to keep it all together so we can have a human being, right? You need to have skin covering over the blood, the veins, the bones, and everything, keeping it.
And we need an intelligent design of peanuts that can kill people to go alongside of it too, right? Like I'm not really understanding why that would be common sense, because to me it's common sense that a peanut could kill my friend, and that doesn't seem very intelligently designed to me, right? So I guess my common sense wins, right? If we're just going to use a methodology of common sense and not give a shit about what we believe in the world, then my common sense is just better than yours. Why? Because it's common sense. Do I need to actually provide independent justification? No, because I'll just side with my common sense because I'm irresponsible and don't care about knowing the truth. That's what you sound like.
No. Clearly, we have functions that a rock doesn't have, right? So we have a design about us. Clearly, we've been designed in a way
Okay, stop right there. I disagree with clearly we are designed. What is the justification that we are designed? Give the justification. Don't just tell me clearly we are, right? That if you think that has any motivational force for me to believe your claim, like that's mind-blowing to me, right? Why is it clearly the case, right? Provide justification.
Because of all the functions we have in our body, right? We can see that we can do certain things that let's say a rock can't do, for example. So in order for us to do all these things, there's a coordination going on here in our bodily functions in order for us to be able to do a thing that a rock can't do, okay? Our veins serve a purpose, right? Our heart serves a purpose to pump blood and to, like, as an engine. Our brains are like computers.
Snowdon, nothing you have said is inconsistent with a naturalist view, right? Nothing you've said, right? Nothing at all, right? That's actually precisely the things that you're invoking, right? When you even have the knowledge of like the heart pumping blood and things like that, don't come from like this assumption that it was designed, right? You're having to like use the infrastructure that was built on the method that seemingly you deny, right? In order for you to stand on top of the building and shout your ignorance, right? That's what's going on. You're going to have to, you can't just like you can't bastardize what other people did in their novel predictions and then be like, well, clearly it's for design. No, those weren't part of the predictions. It's clearly not the case.
And something else too is a lot of the things, of course, a lot of the things that you've said are things that have been demonstrated by science, and we have statistics to demonstrate that they are significant. But there's a lot that I've studied. So I study the human body. This is what I've been doing for years. And there are many things that we've learned about the human body that I would know that you cannot learn just by common sense. And one of these, if you go read embryology, this is my favorite example. It is not intuitive. The way that the human forms, and even the human heart, the way the human heart forms is not intuitive. So, and that's a whole other conversation for a different day.
My only thing is, I don't believe, right? When I say give, things that were given to us, right? I don't see it as, I'm not saying that how, what I'm saying is that God could be anything. We could have been put here by aliens, for example. Okay.
Oh my gosh, Snowdon, I'm so not interested anymore. If you like, call back next time and give justification, because we're wasting time and you haven't given any justification for the claim that you think. So sorry, call back. It's just we had other callers to get to. If you're not going to directly answer what the justification is, it's just a waste of our time. It's a waste of the audience time. That said, if you want to go back and listen to podcasts that you've missed over the weeks, you can do so at tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. There it is. You got AXP, you got secular sexuality, you got Talk Heathen, you got Truth Wanted, you got it all right there on the go for a run, a jog, a skateboard, whatever your needs are. We also have the Facebook group, fan run Facebook group at tiny.cc/FBTH. Again, great resource. Any community you can join where you feel like you're alone and there aren't people that think the same as you or going through struggles coming out as an atheist, and having to deal with the backlash of that. There are people out there that deal with the same, and those communities are great for that, among other things, just discussing these types of topics. And then also, Ben, I hear you're going to be on the Discord after the show. I'm going to be on the Discord.
Yeah.
So you can go to tiny.cc/ACD Discord, which is a fan run Discord group. And we will be there at, I believe, 3, it's like my time is different. So it's like 3:45 my time, 2:45 Central. And then after that at 3 p.m. Central, we have the flagship show of the AEN network, which is the nonprofits, everybody. And so go check that out at 3 p.m. Central. We got a lot of calls, so let's go ahead and go to Todd in Florida. Wants to talk about objective morality. Pronouns are he, him.
He, him.
Todd, how you doing?
This is Todd. I am the true Todd. Yeah, objective morality. I've heard it discussed before. And some people use the argument of it's just common sense, or it just feels right, or without God-given morality, everyone would be killing each other and killing and raping and pillaging and so forth, which I find absurd because they generally say without the knowledge of the morality given by the Abrahamic God, which ignores the fact there are thousands of cultures around the world that never heard of the Abrahamic God, and somehow they have endured. How did that happen? But specifically, I find a great hypocrisy that there is this idea that consenting adults doing things with each other's genitals is somehow angering an imaginary deity, and yet standing a person on top of a stack of wood and restraining them while burning them alive, that's okay under certain circumstances. And in fact, it's commanded by the Abrahamic God in certain circumstances. How did we get there?
Well, so I guess my question is, are you concerned with like the declaration of it coming from or being an objective source, or are you just pointing out like the kind of inconsistencies of, because I'm trying to understand the at least the criticism.
I think taking an objective view of morality and saying that which does great harm to the well-being of other people is objectively a bad thing to do and therefore immoral, I think that is a good argument against the divinity of the Abrahamic God.
So I'm going to be in disagreement with you because I don't know that morality is objective. I don't actually agree with that. So I don't know that, like, I mean, couldn't it not just be the case that it's that this God just determines what is good and whether or not we decipher that being objective or not? I don't know that, like, I mean, because you're going to have to do the work to show that, like, what you mean by well-being is actually, like, you know, the what's called the categorical imperative, which is like what we should be in accord with. Not like if I buy into some goal, right? But like objectively the case, right? Stance independent, just the idea that I'm going to have to be in accord with that or else I'm not in accord with it. So for the force of that argument to work, I mean, you're going to have to even establish objective morality because they're not going to agree. Like, obviously, if your interlocutor is a Christian, they're not going to agree with you, right? They're just going to think that you're begging the question against their view because they don't hold to the same metaethical view or view on morality. That would be the one concern.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because objective morality is one of the points that is often argued by theists against non-theists or anti-theists. I'm
not convinced that they have objective morality, but I can explain that later.
I agree, and they explain it to say that objective morality would have to come from somewhere. It's a little bit like the intelligent design creationism argument that everything has to have some cause, everything has to come from somewhere, including the things that we as humans believe to be right or wrong.
Yeah, so
things could not right or wrong because a civilization.
Are you Todd? Are you familiar with like distinctions of what? Because it's not that this is like the end all be all, but since I guess we were talking about philosophy earlier in the show, like are you familiar with what like the philosophical distinctions on what objective and subjective are? Not that like it's the only one or something like that, but are you familiar with that distinction?
Yes.
Yeah, so objective is going to be mind. Real fast, Todd. It's going to be mind independent if it's objective, and it's going to be mind dependent. So if somebody says it has to come from somewhere, that doesn't really like elucidate much, because like if I'm a moral subjectivist, I think a moral proposition is true in virtue of my attitudes that I have, right, or my desires or something like that. And so that comes from somewhere. I can predicate specifically where that comes from in the world, which is my brain or my values or my desires, or what I feel like when I do an action to somebody else and I see their response, right? But saying it comes from somewhere from them, that what they're going to say is that it's going to be independent of human minds, right? It's going to be independent of like our opinion about it. But there's a worse issue for the Christian, in my opinion, or the theist, that even in the case where like you're grounding the objectivity in like God's commands, that's going to be like funneled internally to God's properties, right? If we reduce that, it's going to be constitutive of God's properties. And so the idea is going to be that, at least the argument that I try to run on this is, what would be the contradiction in a God that has basically the exact same properties as your God, but one different moral property, and that is like in the trolley problem, it chooses to save the 5 over the 1, whereas your God chooses the 1 over the 5. Now, presumably, there's a different property in the God I'm positing, which makes that decision morally right, which shows that it's going to just be arbitrary, because whatever set of properties God has is just going to determine what's good. And then if we have verses like Romans 2:15 or something where it's like written on our hearts, then we're never actually going to know, right, if it's really the good. So it's going to be subjective. So long-winded to say, I don't think you need to make this argument against it, because theism, in my opinion, is inherently a subjective metaethical thesis, because any God with a set of properties just determines what's good. And if it was an evil God, that would determine the good, but the properties are different. That'd be like Ben saying, I think X is good, and then me saying, I think Y is good, right? We have different sets of properties, right? Different attributes, and we determine the good. That would be the same. So I don't know that you have to put as much focus on that as much as you have to say, look, what you're positing is subjectivism. It's not objectivism at all, right? I don't know if all that made sense, but
that does make sense in the realm of reason. The problem is, as Martin Luther said, that the tenets of Christian faith in the presence of reason would be absurd and false. And so to the theist, or rather to the Christian, a book says a thing, and all of their ancestors believe this thing, and they don't want to think that their ancestors were somehow buying into a flawed form of reasoning, so they double down and stand.
I see what you're saying.
In that way of thinking, and they call it objective because it is what the lawgiver says. And so a book says a thing, I believe it, that settles it. My faith trumps all else. And in doing so, they leave the realm of reason. And I would say attempting to reason from the position of Christianity is disobedient to the commandments that Christians are told to have faith, that they must have faith. And if reason could substitute for faith, you wouldn't need faith. So by attempting to reason your beliefs, you are demonstrating a lack of faith.
Well, I want to, Ben, I want to see if you get your thoughts. I'm sorry, I'm taking this call over the whole time. I don't know if you wanted to say anything before I spew again.
This isn't really my area, and I am not ashamed to admit it.
Sure. No, that's why. That's with the other call. It's like that's kind of how. I think that's why me and Ben are a great team. Is like when we do shows, we're just like, oh, you got this. This one's yours. It's great. But yeah, no. I guess one of the things that would be worth mentioning, and because the double down part, like if someone's gonna be like, you can kind of point out an inconsistency, like they really truly care about their well-being, right? And then when presented some dilemma about like their faith or religion, where they seemingly choose the God or the faith or the Holy Spirit or whatever over like this instance of suffering, right? I think you can really point out the inconsistencies when you just ask the questions, like, or you can at least show that their principle really is well-being, in the sense of that, like, or at least what we mean by well-being. I think it's a hard term to define, but I think we all kind of have the same notion when it comes to like when a Christian doesn't want to burn in hell or wants to go to heaven and be with God. I mean, what is primary there, right? It's their well-being, right? What happens when they go to hell? They burn, right? It affects them directly, right? That's why they care. That's why people care. So I think you can kind of point, at least I don't, it's going to depend on the person, but if somebody's saying like, you know, they choose this principle over that, I think you can point out at the very core, it's like, look, you want to be with God specifically because it affects your well-being, and you don't want to be away from God because it specifically affects your well-being. That's prior. That's completely prior. That's what you're concerned with in all cases. It just happens to be the case that you found this thing and then applied, you know, that after the fact. But I don't know. I don't know if I was trying to make sure I was tracking your point, because I might have gotten lost in part of it.
You're correct. I just wanted to add one other thing of why this concerns me greatly. There is a minority of people in the United States, but a vocal minority, that are of the opinion that if we as a nation tolerate certain behaviors which they consider to be immoral, then God cannot bless America. And because they feel so strongly about that, they are doing things to try and manipulate positions of authority to gain more access to representation in our government to promote that idea. And I consider that dangerous, and I consider it immoral, because their beliefs are rooted in unprovable things, whereas I think it's demonstrably provable that lighting people on fire and burning them to death is a bad thing, and that's probably why we don't do it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Like in the case that you give, there's some real, like tangible interaction with, you know, setting someone on fire, where you can really, you can really emotionally feel that. But in the other case, we don't even know if the God exists, so we don't even know if, like, what's being predicated is even has a referent in the world. And I would agree there 100%. Like there's the thing at which they espouse is good, right? There's a position in morality called error theory, and it's kind of like moral propositions are false because they don't have a referent in the world. And so it's kind of similar, and at least the way I'm thinking about it in my head now is just like, I mean, all the propositions technically to me are going to be false when you lay them out, like, you know, that murder is wrong in virtue of, you know, God's commands or something, because there's no referent of God that we can point to in the world, right? It's like saying like the king of the United States has a beard. It's like that proposition's false because there's no king of the United States. That refers to nothing in the world. It's like, I know beards exist. That's fine, right? And so in that case, yeah, I would agree. You actually have something. I maybe not say like I get weird with saying right and wrong, but you have something you can actually point to as a referent in the world that affect people, where people are victims of some action. Whereas in their case, when they espouse, it comes from something that you can't even have access to in the world or show even exists. But Todd, we appreciate your call. We're gonna move on. We got a lot of callers I want to get to, but we appreciate you calling in, Todd. All right, and just in case you guys have missed everything and you haven't had time to go back and look at the AEN podcast, here's what you missed.
This is so much more fun than the atheist experience. No one has yelled at me yet.
Right?
You do that. This is so pleasant.
Yeah, we've been talking about brains and porn, which are really like two of my favorite things. So we're in great shape.
So I believe that good arguments are like IKEA or Legos, that you can give me the pieces and the instructions and I can put them together for myself. Let's start by defining it. You tell me what critical race theory is and tell me how that is inherently causing people to become racist, please.
That no single church can afford that $100 million.
I just see it like a kind of thing like buy a Jesus, get your salvation for free.
Nice to speak to you, Kenneth, and I'm sorry, I forgot the other fellow's name.
Depending on what show, some people call me Giant Mike, I've gotten, and JMike, and all sorts of things. So
they call him on his OnlyFans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
They're officially recognized as haunted venues. They're called haunted.
Yes, they're officially recognized by batshit crazy people who are fans of haunted houses, just like gods are officially recognized by their devotees. I don't care whether something's officially recognized. I care whether or not there's actual evidence for it.
Well, that is what you missed. So go back and watch those episodes. They're there forever. So
who was that guy with Kenneth? What's his name?
Mike. Just Mike. No other names. Yeah. No, there I got like Frost Giant Mike, Giant Mike. It was like a week of people calling in and just like what JMike or what is it? And so it became a thing. So Giant Mike was a thing. Dan will tell you all about it. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on to. We're gonna go to another caller here in. Let's go to. Hopefully I'm saying this right. Oflameo. Hopefully I pronounced that right. I'm sorry if I butchered your name, but it says you're a polytheist. Pronouns are he, him from Pennsylvania. How's it going?
It's going well.
Great. What'd you want to talk about?
So I just want to ask you I think it's a pretty simple question. Are people who believe ideas are real and believe gods are ideas theists, or are they atheists? So I personally claim gods or entities in social political space, and I define gods as objects of worship.
This is gonna really depend because like when you talk about ideas and we like mental content or something like that, it doesn't follow that I agree that I can have mental content of a unicorn, but therefore like it follows that I believe there's a unicorn just because I believe I can have mental access to conjuring it up in my mind or something like that. So I'm not really understanding.
Yeah, I think there's like a physical assumption you have to make. If you are a materialist, you'll say ideas do not exist. So the answer would be atheist. But if you're an idealist like me, I would say ideas do exist. So you would be a theist.
You would be a theist because why?
Ideas do exist.
Yeah, but that's fine. I can concede that I can furnish mental content, right? I can look at the external world and I can furnish my mental content and go, okay, there's a drum set or something. Okay. I can also furnish my mental content in my mind and just be like, I'm a brain in a vat, right? Doesn't mean I believe that I'm a brain in a vat because the mental content exists. Like it seems weird to me because like I can have a proposition in my head and it be true or false, but that doesn't like imply what the truth value of the content or the proposition is. You're talking about two distinct things, right? These are two distinct things, right? These are one thing is demonstrated and the other thing is just an idea, right? You have to actually have a methodology that shows the idea in your head reflects reality in some way.
The idea in your head is literally reality. What you can see, what you can interact with is literally reality.
Everything.
Dashboard, but there's universes where there's things that interact with each other are. So
maybe I'm not tracking, but on parity of reason, right? It sounds like what you're saying is that the fact that some other entity exists, like mental content, that therefore whatever the content refers to exists, but by parity of reasoning, then anything exists that we can conceive of. It doesn't make any sense.
Yes, anything that you can conceive of exists.
Yeah, I just deny that. What's your evidence for that being true?
We can conceive of it.
Yeah, that's I don't care about the claim being restated twice. I care about what's the evidence for the claim.
That is the evidence claim. Because
no, it's not. Do you know what question begging is?
It's not being a question. That's literally how I define it. If we conceive of it, then it's an idea.
Okay, so ideas exist because ideas exist. What's the evidence? I'm trying to understand. What's the supporting premise?
I don't need a supporting premise.
Okay, then I don't need to talk. Then I don't need to talk to you.
The reference because I'm a dealer. The reference.
I don't need to talk to you. Okay, let's move on to David in North Carolina. Science and mysticism. How can terms overlap and differences in their focuses? Ben, do you want to? Let's have you start this off because
Okay.
maybe I might hang up on this one. So no.
Hey,
David, how you doing?
Hey, JMike. Hey, Ben, how you doing? I've enjoyed the show. I've got a short list. The intelligence in our, quote, intelligent design is machine learning done from the ground up by a little molecule through natural selection. It's very smart in some ways, really dumb in other ways, but that's the measure of the intelligence that went into our, quote, design.
So I'll push back on that. I don't think that there's any learning done by molecules. I think they happen to be in the right place at the right time, and whether or not that's coincidental is something that would need to be demonstrated. But was that is that the main point of your question, or?
No, what I was going to say, but machine learning is a computer programming term, and it's about organizing information. And the process of natural selection is just machine learning. Every bit of our machine learning works the exact same way. Mutation, trying it out, you know?
So, I think that these might be comparable, but I'm hesitant to say that it's the same mechanism, especially if I'm not a computer scientist. So of course I don't know much about computer coding, but I'm hesitant to follow the logic of implying that molecular interactions or that genetics are analogous to computer code.
I am not willing to make the leap into the astral belief myself. I do suppose that it is at its roots still fundamentally an allegorical way of referring to it.
It's fundamentally what?
I suppose that this machine learning is still an allegory, because I too would not make the leap into the belief in the astral plane, in the astral realm.
I guess it's strange. It's strange though. It's like, because you can draw analogies on a lot of things, right? And you identify something in common or some property in common, and then distinguish based on there. But I guess I'm confused because with coding or something like people do this DNA and code. In order for it to be a 1-to-1, the analogy has to imply a coder in that case. But using the analogy of code in a different way, absent that, might be okay in educational senses. I guess I'm just not.
Machine learning codes without us coding it. That's the key feature of it.
Sure, yeah. I'm a programming major. I got that. I'm just not understanding what the analogy can imply for you.
We seem to be, and I suppose I can understand, guarding that I'm trying to sneak in some theist premise when.
No, I'm not. I figured there was a reason for it, and that's.
Well,
I guess I'm just confused about what the question is.
Yeah, I hear you. I didn't pose a question.
No, not. Go ahead.
I suppose I was just belting out my comment to a previous caller. I was going to talk with you guys about the religion I was raised in, and I'm just unsure if religion is a proper term for it anymore, because it holds no tenets. It's a huge religion. Sant Mat. Have you ever heard of Sant Mat? Buddhists, Hindus, Sikhs, Jains. There are more Sant Mat than there are Jews in the world.
Not familiar.
No. Okay.
It's also kind of hard for me. Some words it's hard for me to pick up on my end, but that's the call quality. So
I'll try to be more conscious of that as I talk. Thanks for letting me know.
Tell us a little bit about this.
When I was a little kid, it embraced religious terminology, but by the time I was in my 20s, there was a real shedding of religiosity to the point where now I almost feel like I'm mislabeling it when I tell you what I was taught this is called as a kid, you know? But have you heard of Sam Harris talk about mindfulness meditation?
A little bit. I really don't like follow a lot of what Sam Harris does outside of like the morality thing, and that's really because I don't really agree with his take on it. But so I'm just not really familiar.
I'm not a big fan of his politically, but speaking about mindfulness meditation, it's when he talks about mindfulness meditations, he never says anything speculative. It's all thoroughly grounded in 40 years of cognitive science research, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
The same methods were introduced to me as a kid in totally mystical kind of language, as transcendental meditation on the holy breath, the holy name, which is the breath, which you know, the guru was the great kind of teacher about the techniques, the methodology. We had the big three was a satsang, service, and meditation. My dad used to say, because my dad was more of an atheist, he used to say, the meditation doing service is good for you as a person.
Is there any way we can? Sorry, I don't mean to be rude, David. I want to see if there's a way we can streamline this because I got other callers. What's the main gist here?
The main gist was telling you about the religion I was raised in.
Huh? No, I know, but what I'm saying.
What my question was, but.
Yeah, I know. I guess I'm getting lost and I'm not really tracking.
Well, the religion I'm describing being raised in was used those terms, but had no objectively theistic beliefs, no magical beliefs, no supernatural beliefs, except maybe the prevalence of the belief in reincarnation. But I always took that in, which is a very traditional way to take it, that it's just kind of invoking the original position premise or original position morality, you know, veil morality, you know.
As in like a result of actions you do? Yeah. Okay.
Well, no, that's a key feature that's very like no note on is to think that that there's any kind of a one-to-one in the entanglement of dharma and trying to make wise choices to not cause suffering in others and in oneself.
Yeah, that area I'm really I wouldn't have much to be able to speak on. I don't know if Ben, if you have anything.
I mean, not really. I mean, it sounds like mysticism, and I wonder if you were trying to talk about if it's technically a religion, even if it doesn't imply theism or something. I mean, from what you kind of talked about,
it's chosen to not be a religion, and it shed its religiosity. Now, mindfulness meditation is not referred to as transcendental meditation. Maharaji got rid of the divine light mission, and now he calls himself a motivational speaker. You know, nothing's changed, but all the terms have changed, you know?
I mean, it sounds like it's updating to be more, you know, up to date with what we know. So maybe, I mean, sure, maybe it's not a religion.
It's one of the world's biggest populated religions. There's more Sanmat than there are Jews in the world.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. Do you think that there are still spiritual influences in this, or do you think they're completely separating themselves from the spiritual?
Spiritual can be a tricky term. From the supernatural and from any supernatural beliefs, certainly. I remember one of the last satsang discussions that with the videotape of the guru I saw was him kind of not begging, that's overly dramatizing, but trying to coax his devotees to give up fantasy life, that reality is good enough.
Okay, so it sounds like they've moved from a place where they were incorrect about things, and now they're moving into being more applicable. So I think I don't know if I have a problem with that necessarily, but I don't know the full story of this organization and what they're doing and what they're teaching people.
Yeah, that's
So.
kind of my.
But they're
It's
not
hard
even
to
an
comment.
organization anymore. They disbanded the organization.
So that's the thing, is it's kind of hard to follow on some of that without some information. But David, no, we appreciate it. We're gonna try to get all these callers in if we can. But we do appreciate your call. We're going to take I believe it's Nekoda in North Carolina. Pronouns are he, him. Wants to talk about abortion being morally wrong.
Yes, let's do this.
So Ben, you sound eager, so let's.
Oh,
I won't get in your way. I won't get in your way. How you doing?
Hey, how y'all doing?
Doing good. So yeah, run us through your claim here.
I got like a 30-second rant that I have to go through. Can I get through it without being in?
No
Depends
rant.
on what you say.
No rant. Yeah, no rant. Preferably, but because I gotta get some shout outs and patrons and stuff. So let's try to keep it. Yeah, convey as much as you can, but in short as possible.
All right. Here we go. It says abortion is morally wrong. We as atheists have no problem acknowledging that the concept of inherent sin is immoral. We have no problem acknowledging that if there is a God, that it would be immoral for him to sentence us to an eternity of fire and brimstone. These same atheists would have you believe that a woman has the right to murder a human, being that in most cases being a direct result of their actions.
All right, so I'm gonna jump in right here because I think we are very inconsistent about what abortion is, and I don't think people understand what abortion is. What is abortion?
Killing a human. Potential.
Nope. Okay, so let me talk a little bit. So abortion, there are very specific definitions according to the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. So abortion specifically refers to the ending of a pregnancy 20 weeks or earlier in gestation. This does not mean it is caused by a doctor or a surgeon. It could be a spontaneous abortion. Anything that causes the pregnancy to end 20 weeks or earlier is an abortion. Likewise, anything that's beyond 20 weeks that ends a pregnancy is a delivery, because if you are going to end the pregnancy after 20 weeks, at that point, you're going to have to either induce a delivery or they're going to spontaneously deliver. And in both of these cases, there is no assumption that the gestation or the fetus is alive or not. This has nothing to do with the state of living for the fetus. It is only about the state of the pregnancy. Does that make sense? So if you were to have a spontaneous ending of pregnancy prior to 20 weeks, we call that a spontaneous abortion, or we call that a miscarriage. If you were to do that intentionally, that would be a termination. Likewise, if you delivered, let's say you are at 36 weeks, so you're not quite at term, and you deliver, you have to, some medical complication, you need to get the baby out. That is also a termination of pregnancy. Or even if you're at term and you need to get the baby out, but you need to use some medical means, that is a non-spontaneous termination of pregnancy. So knowing those definitions, I think we're not talking about the same thing when we're talking about abortion.
I think all that is irrelevant. Everybody knows what abortion means in generic terms. I'm talking about specific.
So you're talking about non-spontaneous, you're talking about a termination.
Yeah.
So do all terminations end in the loss of life of the fetus?
No.
Okay. So is that wrong? If you were to terminate a pregnancy and the fetus was alive, that is, I think we'd both agree that is a termination that is, like, we'd both agree that that's okay.
No.
How come?
Well, I'm gonna finish on with my rant. Because
No. Look, I can drop you from the show.
let's say I need to terminate a pregnancy. I have a baby that is at 37 weeks. This is a term baby.
Well, I think you should have.
And I need to get it out, and the baby is probably going to live. It's got a very high chance of survivability. I need to terminate the pregnancy.
That's awesome.
Is that moral? Is that okay?
That's not what I'm talking about, though.
So set your parameters then. What context are you talking about that makes it not okay?
When it's not okay, woman specifically kills the kid.
Okay, so anytime, let me get this correct. Anytime you need to terminate a pregnancy and the fetus does not survive, under any context, is that not okay? Are there contexts where that might be okay?
I don't agree. Yeah, when it involves you risking your life, risking it, where there's a probable chance that you will die.
Yeah,
I don't agree that you should give up your life to someone else.
Okay, so there are contexts where termination is appropriate. So then we can't go back and say that abortion or termination is just inherently wrong, right? There are contexts. There are contexts that apply. And so I think applying such a broad term to something that we've established now is referring to a narrow context. Maybe we should talk about the narrow context.
Yeah, otherwise you're just going to be in a performative contradiction.
What I'm talking about, I really couldn't finish. So, man, I don't even know where I'm at. I just don't think it's right for a woman to just kill a kid just because it's an inconvenience to them, because they specifically had so many options to,
Nekoda, are you on speakerphone? Because if you are, I'm gonna ask you to get off speaker if you are.
Sorry. Yes. One second.
Yes, please get off speakerphone. Listen to the screeners; they give good advice.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's way better without the all behind it. So yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, that's the win.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I don't think it's right for someone to terminate a pregnancy for convenience factor.
Okay, so don't do it.
Of me?
Yeah, so don't do it.
Well, I can't. I mean,
are you asserting that you're going to make the decision for somebody else?
I think the court system makes a decision for men when they have them paying child support.
So why is the court stepping in now? This is, do you think that the court or you are going to be able to make the right decision for someone in a medical standpoint? Let's say we have a person who's coming to me. I'm their gynecologist, and they want to terminate their pregnancy, and there are probably multiple factors involved. Are you going to step in and make that decision?
Well,
and with that,
for convenience, because that's convenience is I don't want a bigger belly, or I don't want to raise a kid that I specifically went out of my way almost to.
So how are you determining that was their motivation?
Because they got condoms, they got spermicidal lube, they got.
Okay, how are you specifically determining that is their motivation? Are you talking to them? Are you providing them care? How are you getting this information that you have all the information in this context? What gives you the ability to make this decision for them?
Provide them care all the time with if they have the baby, I do provide them care with all the taxes I pay, and you pay, and everybody else pays.
Okay, so
for adoption.
So not talking about you in a specific you and your partner context, it sounds like you're trying to make a broad statement that nobody should be having these terminations So how are you determining that all of these other cases are for that one reason? Are you in the room listening to their story to determine if their intentions are what they say they are? Who's the arbiter of their intent here?
Subjective to me.
So why do you get to make that decision? Why is this your call?
Why not? Why not?
Are you realizing that you haven't really thought this out? Like, because it seems that like you should at this point be understanding that you're.
I've thought it out.
Because
So
but if
here's
your
something I
thing
wanna-
is just why not, and you can't actually justify your claim, right? Then clearly you didn't think about it. Because I mean, like when I believe something, like I have a justification for it, right? You did.
And I
No,
wanna
it
pose
didn't even
something
seem
to
like
you.
justification even entered in your mind towards that at all, actually. But
I want to pose something to you because it's very easy to sit back and make decisions when you don't face any consequences for it. Put yourself in my shoes or another doctor's shoes or the patient's shoes. But like specifically right now, I'll put you in my shoes. You have somebody coming to you for help and they have a very complex scenario involving their body, their healthcare. You need to make a decision as their doctor. And whatever decision you make, you take full responsibility. If it goes well, sure, it's great, it went well. But if it goes wrong, that is your responsibility. You are the person to blame for this. Are you going to readily make such broad statements, knowing that what you say and what you do are meaningful and they matter, and you will probably be penalized?
You won't get penalized. That's what insurance is for.
No, actually, I would.
They have liability insurance.
We have liability insurance, but we can also lose our license. We have medical boards. I sat through a medical board meeting where they just dragged doctors like through the mud because of decisions they made. People losing their licenses over decisions they made that seemed like minor decisions during that time. It is not easy to take this kind of responsibility. And I think it's incredibly reckless and irresponsible for people to think that they can make these decisions and not have that responsibility. It's a huge weight. Are you ready to bear that weight? And if not, maybe this isn't your decision to make.
I think it is. I think.
all right, Nekoda, give a reason. Don't just say you think it is. Give a reason. Engage with Ben, right? Stop just waiting for your turn to talk. Give a reason. Engage with what he's saying, right?
I want to know your answer to this question. Are you ready to take responsibility for your statements?
Like I did answer. It might have cut out. I can't hear it. But I said I would definitely take accountability if it was my decision. If it was for certain reasons, life and death of the patient that came in. I would.
Yeah, so how would you determine that it's a life or death situation? It's not that black and white. When someone comes in, it's usually very gray areas, and that's why we have to study so hard and go through so much education to even get there, because these are difficult decisions to make, and you have to make the call. Are you ready for that responsibility?
I don't see. I would if but like usually there's no reason for people to have an abortion.
Oh, I will push back on that.
Yeah, push back, please.
Yeah. So even just scientifically, not even factoring in things like socioeconomic situations, because that's probably one of the primary reasons people would get an abortion. But thinking medically, people who are high risk for seizures, people history of preeclampsia or eclampsia, like if you have a seizure during your pregnancy, it could be pretty likely that you'd have sustained damage. Having certain medical conditions that would put you at a high-risk pregnancy. If you were to terminate earlier on versus taking the risk of having complications down the road, pregnancy is not benign by any means. Even beyond the physical changes of like skin elasticity and certain cosmetic things, even besides that, the risk of a pregnancy this is not a decision that anyone should be making for just anyone. My risk of having seizures, my risk of having blood clots, my risk of having other complications, kidney damage, should not be left up to somebody else. There are legitimate reasons to get a termination.
So, you're saying the doctor, like I heard what you just said, the doctor has to take accountability, but the woman chose not to do anything to prevent it. Has no accountability.
You don't know that. You don't know that.
Murder someone. Do they?
You don't know that they didn't take steps to prevent it. Number one, and a lot of times they can't prevent it. Even if everything was consensual and you used protection, it is not 100% effective.
I mean, you could use the spermicidal lube. You could be abstinent.
They're not 100% effective.
Anything.
There is risk. There is still risk.
Abstaining is, but you're going to kill a whole human just because it inconveniences you.
That's not the reason.
Yeah, it's
the majority of the time, that is not the reason. That is absolutely a straw man.
You're literally building up the easiest thing to tear down. That's like so intellectually dishonest. It amazes me that you don't even see that either. Right? Like, because Ben just expressed a multitude of ideas, and what you came with was one thing, which was a straw man that you built, so it was easier for you to seemingly knock down.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let y'all go because y'all just want to talk over people, and I can't even finish my rant.
No, yeah, we'll let you go because we try to take intellectually honest callers, right? So you just review over it, look back over it, see how you waited for your turn to talk, right? Then you did engage, and I'll give you credit on that. I appreciate that. But then you stopped engaging, and you just decided to build a straw man that you could easily tear down instead of actually engaging with what Bennett said, right? That's fine. You can project to me all you want. Doesn't matter, right? But anyway, let's go to on a good note, positive note. We got top 5 patrons to do, and you can become a patron at tiny.cc/PatreonTH. And our top 5 for the week are, drumroll, please. No drum roll? We're not there yet. We'll get a drum roll eventually. I'll shell out the
drum set.
I do. I have an electric kit. I'm not very good at it, so I can't do a drum roll very well. So, number 1, Eric Tweet. Number 2, Dingleberry Jackson. 3, Balaam's Donkey. Actually, that didn't sound right. Number 2, Dingleberry Jackson, everybody. 3, Balaam's Donkey. 4 is Ayami. 5 is Dan Conger. And the honorary mention is John Sanderson. And we really, really, really appreciate anybody, not just the top 5, but anybody that's a patron or anybody that donates to the show or joins or likes or subscribes or shares it. We really appreciate that. I think we got time for another call. We can do a quick one.
I'm fired up now. Let's go.
You're fired up, yeah. I enjoyed I want to watch that again just to listen to you again, to be honest. We're going to go to Keith in New Jersey. How do people define and refer to science? I think this will be one that we can squeeze in pretty easily. Mm-hmm. Keith, how's it going?
Hello. Hey, Big Mike, how are you?
I'm okay, Keith. How you doing?
I want a cool name. I feel left out.
Yeah. Well, this is the first time I feel included, so it is. Anyway, Keith, how you doing? What you said you want to talk about how people define and refer to science. Is there any kind of comments you wanted to make before you get me or Ben's opinion on it?
Yeah, what I wanted to kind of refer to is when people basically refer to, well, you believe in science, or is science really the only way that you come to know whatever you claim to know? The way I view science is just being the most efficient critical thinker that you can be. That's why there's not one scientific method. That's how I envision it. And I had kind of a fun example that happened to me last weekend, and I thought I'd share it with you guys. And that was kind of similar to what I'm saying. Do you disagree with the way I'm characterizing science?
You talking about its scope of methodology being, because I'd want to argue that there's a pretty strict methodology at which, like, you couldn't just kind of throw out falsification and side with like just verification, for example, right? Right. So, but I don't want to make like a fuss on the point, but I say that there are points in the method that like you can't throw away, otherwise you're in some weird verificationism, and I wouldn't hold to that methodology.
Yeah, no, I think that falsification is part of being a very efficient critical thinker. Therefore, I think that is like when people use the phrase "you're very scientific minded." I think that's falsification would be included in that kind of mindset.
Okay. Yeah.
You agree?
Yeah. No, I just kind of draw those barriers in case someone's like, "Well, I have this method of science that it only verifies things but doesn't set out to falsify anything," or something like that. Then I'd be like, "That's pseudoscience." Yeah.
Well, I think that
right, sure.
I think the critical thinking is an important component. I don't think science is limited to critical thinking, because you have things like stats and math that you need, which sure, you can think your way through math. But we have some very well-defined measures within the math itself that I think if you were to do the scientific method without the stats, we wouldn't be as confident in our answers as we are.
Sure. And in my mind, I'm thinking that if you are a stats-minded person, you're scientifically, I guess, method or scientific minded, like the way you are, you would be more efficient than I would. I'm just making the example that the most efficient critical thinkers would be more, you would refer to them as being scientifically minded or having some of the best methods out there to figure out if what they're actually seeing or experiencing is actually corresponds to reality, right?
I mean, that's the goal of the scientific method, sure.
Right. Okay. I just want to give a fun example that I came across, about a week ago. So I have a Tesla, right? And a customer of mine sends me a message and says, "Keith, give me a call as soon as you can. I want to tell you something about your car." And so I was this is like a secretary or whatever. And so I call up and she's like, "My son lives in an apartment complex and there's a, parking garage downstairs and there's a row of chargers and there's, Teslas there and all this. And he has a Honda." And she says, and oddly enough, every time he goes to a Tesla and he double clicks his Honda, the key fob, the lights flash. And he goes to the next car and he double clicks on it again and boom, the lights flash again. And she's like, "Do you know if there's any kind of bug that's going on with the cars?" And I'm like, "No." I said, but that's kind of funny that you mentioned that, because what happens is there's an alert system in there called Sentry Mode. So if somebody gets too close to the car, it elevates the alert system to flash the lights and starts recording any activity around the car. And he was associating it with his key fob because he was moving from car to car. And I kind of associated that with, like, if he had a more critically minded thought process, he would have done a better job of kind of whittling down the cause and effect aspect.
I mean, sure. And this is a process I like to take people through, because what he did was he used his intuition. He had something that related to something else that happened afterwards. And it's easy to draw a pattern in your brain of, okay, this followed this. But human brains are really good at making shortcuts. And it's just something that we do in human psychology. But we have to kind of train our brains to, even in medical school, we were taught to learn how to stop intuiting, because your intuition is probably wrong. Or even if it isn't, you need to make sure that you've accurately included other options. So the reason why we do differential diagnoses is because, sure, you might think immediately that this one thing is the pattern, but patterns are not super useful in ruling anything out, because if you can't think of something that maybe doesn't quite fit, or you have a high possibility of ruling out good answers. So that's why in medicine we take a whole list and we say, what are all of the things that can cause a headache? And you write all of them down, whether or not they seem like they fit. You write it down,
Sure.
and then you can rule things out. But yeah, I do think that relying on intuition makes for poor critical thinking, and we do need to connect the dots better from A to B to C instead of jumping from A to C. So I'm with you on that. I think we agree there.
Yeah, I mean, there's also a point of like
I just
just
wanted to-
intuitions having any force. Like if you don't share the same intuition, I don't know how someone else is going to be forced by a claim about an intuition that the person has, especially if like I don't have access to their mind. I don't even know if they truly have that intuition or not, right? It's just a claim that they have that. But if it's the case that I can like rival your intuition with mine, that it's like faith at that point. It's like, well, we need to introduce something else because this shit ain't working.
Yeah, something that I say a lot is that intuition is great for ruling in answers, but is terrible for ruling out answers. It's like, it's great patterns are awesome when you need to think of things that fit together, but it's not good enough a tool to eliminate bad answers.
Because so like in philosophy of science, there's something called problem of underdetermination. It kind of sounds like what you're saying is there's this problem of underdetermination if you just solely relied on what fits the data as opposed to ruling them out. That's interesting. Sorry, Keith, I didn't mean to talk over you. I just was fascinated by that.
No, I was just, I think that what you're saying is maybe intuition is a good hypothesis, but just not good enough to be a theory.
Exactly. Like if I'm a physician, and let's say yesterday I had a patient who had anemia, or even, this is even better, when I misdiagnosed somebody yesterday who had anemia and then I find out that that's what they had, the next day I get a patient with the same presentation and my brain is very likely to say, yeah, I was burned on this yesterday. I'm not going to miss it today. I'm going to diagnose them with anemia. And maybe they do, maybe they don't. If they don't have it, I just completely disregarded my entire thought process and just used the thing that I missed yesterday. It's an availability heuristic. So I was lazy, and I like to call it cognitive laziness because I just didn't even think through the problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, like the intuition was great in that I brought in that knowledge of the pattern that I saw yesterday, but that pattern alone is not enough for me to just not think through the rest of the equation.
Right.
Does that help? Anything else you wanted to add, Keith? We're going to try to get to... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, it was great talking to you guys, and thanks for taking my call.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you calling in. It's looking like we might be able to throw in a quick one here, especially since I think me and you might have similar answers.
Yeah.
So let's go to Adam in Canada. What is your strongest proof for atheism? So I guess it's going to also depend on what people mean by atheism, which is a hot topic for some people. I'm inclined to I started on the position of I don't believe a God exists, and I've been more confident to the claim that gods do not exist. The only type of justification I could offer would be some type of like deductive argument, but I don't really. I take a position that like Graham Oppy takes about arguments where like if I render you an argument that God doesn't exist, when we get to like premise 3, it's just going to assume something that you don't believe potentially, and you're just going to reject the premise. And so it won't have any force. So the better take is to just use arguments to show what someone else is convinced by and show them the contradiction. So in that case, like a God that can't fail and wants a world without evil, and then there's evil, we can go, well, hey, there's this God that can't fail, but failed at its action, which is a contradiction, therefore it doesn't exist. Those types of arguments you could use against specific gods, but for like global atheism, I'm not convinced that like a theist is going to be compelled by him, even if you are, because you're just going to assume some metaphysical considerations that they reject.
I mean, from the scientific perspective here, like, it's not something you can even demonstrate scientifically because, I mean, statistically, even we're in some weird problems where we have a universe of n equals 1. Our sample size is 1. How do we even make a control group?
Yeah.
Where n equals 1? How do we even design a study? So that's where I'm at.
So mine was more like a thought experiment than a proof, I suppose. But the thought experiment was like, so just as it's a thought experiment. So there's going to be some things that are for argument that aren't actually possible. But say a new
that's fine.
being showed up from a completely different universe in the middle of Times Square. They looked around and they're in love immediately. There's things moving around. There's things in the air. There's clouds. They immediately go about trying to understand how all of it works based on our current understanding of the universe. So from the Big Bang, where we can get the radioactive or the microwave background, all the way up to stars forming and exploding numbers of times so they can get heavy elements, to planets forming, to where we are today, to our understanding of evolution, just loving every second of it, getting all the data that he could possibly get. Based on today's understanding, at what point would they then get into even the idea of religion and gods when it comes to how objective reality works?
How would they get to the idea of God from that set of information? Well, the propositional
objective, collecting objective data, right? Or trying to understand how objective reality works. So not the subjective, but objective reality.
I would get, so if it's a thought experiment and we're like in the philosophy domain at all, so I don't want to bore people, but it's going to matter what we mean, like in terms of like internalism or externalism for justification. Right. Because like, if you're an internalist or something, like you can be justified to say there's a tree there, when in fact it's like you're a brain in a vat, but you're in what furnishes your mental content or what you're experiencing subjectively, like is justified because it's part of your direct experience, even if it is some deception. So I would have a very that I don't want to sound like a cop out, but it's like sorry, go ahead.
There's a shared space between everybody who is subjective, right? And so it's the objective. But yes.
So they assume that's fine. So that would like assuming like externalism or something. So the question is what they would use. Sorry, go ahead.
A new creature from a different universe, different rules. So they've got to learn everything about this objective reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, one is a question of whether or not the method or scope we have works. Then the other question is if it doesn't, then it sounds like we're kind of shit out of luck. I don't really know how we would. It's gonna depend, right? It's gonna depend on like certain norms that you have for deciphering truth. But for me, it could just be the case that there's some other way to detect at least the data. But I don't know. I don't really know how to answer the question, to be honest, because it just seems to assume more that's out of my access, I guess.
All right. It seems to me that if somebody just showed up today, was interested in figuring out how the world works, would have a pretty good explanation of it, and would then have to try to shoehorn a god into it, as opposed to.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I thought you were saying a different set, like a complete. Sorry, the objective part of the reality part I got confused on. So I was thinking you were saying like some different objective reality. I must have missed something there completely.
No,
sorry.
I just didn't want it to be, because I'm convinced that like God like can only, well, doesn't exist, but it is completely subjective. Like if humans cease to exist tomorrow, any idea of a God that we used to have ceases to exist as well, right? There is no, well, I don't think anybody on Earth has written anything correctly about anything supernatural.
Well, I mean, it's still going to be the case that if the state of affairs are true, that thing exists, but the actual access to knowing it is one thing. I mean, I guess my take, if I'm understanding it fully, it's been one of those mental days, is that to me, and I'm a skeptic, it seems to me that everything is consistent with a deception in the first place, right? So like, it could just be the case that whatever they shoehorn in to, like, the explanation of a god or something is really something that exists, but is presented itself as revelatory, but is just deceiving it, right? It wants it to think it's Yahweh, or it wants it to think it's Allah. In reality, it's just like masquerading as that thing. And so it's hard for me to, for me, it's that I think everything is underdetermined, and that's why science is a good methodology, in the sense of that you can produce kind of not, future predictions that are going to adjudicate one over the other. So I don't know if that necessarily answers the thought experiment of the question. I might have to go back and hear what you said to make sure I'm even digesting it right. But Ben, do you have anything, or do you?
This sounds like an area that it's getting into the philosophy weeds.
I think I'm just misinterpreting what was said. And that's happened like 3 times today, so that's on me. So
yeah, no, I think I don't think I have much to add on that.
No worries. Maybe I'll try to put it together better and call back at a different time.
Well, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt that it's me. So,
oh no, my perspective is limited in these kinds of areas. So like, especially when we start bringing objectivity into it, like, I don't know, I'm a scientist.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry.
But
go ahead, Adam.
Natural and objective are similar to me, right? Like I'm saying subjective is the mental and objective is physical. Was I labeling it wrong?
Well, I mean, that is, like, an idealist wouldn't agree with you, obviously, because they're not going to believe that things are physical in that case. Like, they're going to think objective reality is some mental phenomena or something like that. But but if you're just
okay, so they're
right. So a lot of this will assume certain metaphysical positions that someone else holds, which is why when I went into the internal externalism thing, is that, like, if someone's an externalist, they're going to, like, actually think there's an external world, an objective world for them to furnish their content. Whereas, like, someone who's like an internalist with justification can be perfectly happy saying, like, I'm in a matrix and it doesn't matter because my justification on things are going to be internal to me. And so the reason why that distinction, if I was tracking it right, matters is because it's going to assume different metaphysical outlooks on the world to begin with. So your explanation of some phenomena or the justification for it's going to be different than maybe someone else who holds, like, a different form of justification. But yeah, that's all nuanced, and for a lot of people, like, that, not the most exciting thing, and a lot of times I agree. So, but yeah, Adam, we appreciate the call. We got like 3 minutes until Discord. We got like 3 minutes till Discord. So we're gonna try to get on there as quick. If you want to follow us on Discord, tiny.cc/ACD Discord. You can also support us by being a member, by hitting the join button below the video, as well as the donation button below the live chat. You can go to the fan run Facebook group at tiny.cc/FBTHG, AEN podcast at tiny.cc/AEN podcast. A lot of ways that you can link up with the atheist community of Austin, and many shows for you to watch. Ben, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube. My channel is Student Dr. Ben. Listed here, kind of my most notable show is a live show on Saturdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time called Medical Myths, where I talk about pseudoscience. Find me there. I also talk about, like, medicine and folklore is the series I'm going through right now. Also on Twitter, Student Doc Ben. That's where I'm at.
Nice. Well, this is the time that I want to shout out the lovely crew. Let's give a nice little glamour shot on all of them. Look at them. And look at the kitty sleeping. It's a good scene there. I want to send love rings to the crew and send love rings to the viewers and anybody that is, been on the front lines with COVID from the beginning till now. We really appreciate it. Ambulance drivers, Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, Grubhub taxi drivers, people working restaurants, anything and everything. We really, really appreciate it. And if you don't believe, this is your community. If you do believe, we don't hate you. We're just not convinced. So call us and convince us.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.